We are recording the interview of Michael Green. This interview is being conducted by Wallace Crabb and Ericka Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Dayton Vet Center at 3085 Woodman Drive, Dayton, Ohio. It is 11:15 a.m. on October 15, 2019. So let's start with when and where you were born.
Born on the Air Force Base in Minot, North Dakota, back in 1980, in May.
All right, your mother and father, what did they do?
Mom always worked in retail. She was a secretary for the longest time, but then had problems with her hands and tendonitis, stuff like that. So she ended up working retail for longest time. And Dad was in the Air Force. He worked on the Minuteman II missiles for the Air Force, worked on the silos, repairing them, fixing them, making sure everything worked.
So your dad was in the Air Force. Did you have any other siblings? Maybe they were in the service too?
My little sister, no, she's never been in the service, never had to want to be in the service. I've had just about every person in my family, for every generation anyway, going all the way back to the Civil War, at the very least, has been in the service. Though.
What were you doing before you joined service? And which, I guess, branch did you join?
Well, before I joined, I was just working kind of dead-end jobs and whatnot. I had just moved out of the family's house and living on my own and decided just to join. So I joined the Army National Guard in Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska. And it was probably a pretty good decision on my part.
So you have a family history of military. Did that ever influence your decision to go into the military?
At first, I didn't even really think about it when I first looked at it back in high school, and then later on, when I did actually join, I didn't even know about a lot of my family history, except for, of course, my dad. But after I joined, some people started speaking out, especially my grandmother, who was really into genealogy. She started mentioning all these things, and my grandfather being in World War II and stuff like that. So that was that kind of sparked my interest in the past generations, but I hadn't really known about my family background in the military until after I joined.
Did you, what was it like living in a military household? I mean, you were born on an Air Force base.
I really didn't know the difference between living in a military family and not, because that's, of course, all I'd known. I know we didn't have a lot of money. We were very strapped for cash. My dad was enlisted, so and he only made it to E6 by the time he retired, so we didn't have a lot of money. That's one thing I always remembered was that, and we always never lived where other people did. We were always either on base housing. The base housing that we lived in for most of my life was a ways away from the Air Force Base, in the middle of nowhere, you can really call it. They called it West Nike. It actually had a missile silo on the housing base that we lived on. It only had about 25 houses, and it was in the middle of a field in South Dakota. So it was literally the middle of nowhere. So I lived around everybody else that lived in military families. And then when my parents bought a house later on, we lived nowhere near anyone again. So I didn't, growing up, know the difference between a military family and non-military families.
When you guys bought a house, was it like a farmland kind of house or just a house?
It was just outside of the town. It wasn't farmland really, but it was on about 5 or 6 acres on the side of a hill. I had a quarter-mile walk to our nearest neighbors. I didn't have friends that lived near there, so it was pretty much me and my sister on our own.
Did you move a lot being an Air Force brat?
Not really. We stopped moving when I was really young. I was born in North Dakota. We lived in Vandenberg Air Force Base in California for about 2 or 3 years. That's where my sister was born. And soon after she was born, we moved to South Dakota, and that's where my dad was stationed for the rest of his time, or most of his career. So we didn't move a lot, but we didn't, like I said, I don't remember the early years of moving, so most of my time was in South Dakota, so I don't remember much of the moves. We lived in 3 houses in South Dakota, so.
How many years are you older than your sister?
4 years.
And did you guys not move around a lot because your dad was in a specific field and had a specific job?
His job for the missile silos was very limited where he would go. It was all going to be stateside. and there was only 5 bases probably that have missile silos. So North Dakota, some in California, and then Wyoming and South Dakota, and I think there's some in Montana. But yeah, so there was very limited where you could go, and he actually got to choose where he wanted to go after a little bit, and that was South Dakota. That's where we ended up. And Ellsworth Air Force Base is a base now a lot of people want to go to, mainly because of the climate. Same with Minot, so it wasn't a problem for him staying there.
What do you think about his job?
Looking back at it, I thought it was, when I was a kid, it was just a job. Now I think it's pretty neat that he worked on some of the most powerful things known to man. He didn't work on the actual missiles, he worked on the silos, and some of the stories he'd tell me were humorous when they get bored when the missile silo broke down or something. Or I thought it was neat when a crisis happened, an international crisis, and he would get deployed to the middle of nowhere. They'd put up a tent and he'd park out there, and his job was to fix the silos. If they had to launch and one of the missiles didn't launch, he was supposed to go back and make sure that one was able to. So, I mean, they were meant to survive the initial attack to launch more. Just being a historian, looking back at that, I thought that's kind of neat. How they would actually have people designated to survive the initial attack, to continue the fight.
So your dad did actually go on deployments and leave the house when you were growing up and
A few.
little. How did that make, so we see that you're wearing an Iraqi Freedom Veteran hat.
Mm-hmm.
So you've deployed.
Yes, ma'am.
Did his deployments at all prepare you or your family now, your wife, for what you went through? And we'll get into that more, but I just want to know, you being a child, watching your mom and you guys go through as a family, your dad deploying, how was that for you?
Honestly, I didn't even notice my dad was gone.
What?
He was not gone for very long. It would be a week, maybe.
Oh.
He was gone for overnights quite often because the missile silos weren't close to the base. They were hours, if not days, drive. And he'd be gone overnight all the time. So it wasn't really new for him to be gone for a day or two, so I wouldn't really notice. Usually I was outside messing around doing something. So dad was home, If he wasn't, it wasn't a huge deal. So yeah, I really didn't notice his deployments. His deployment, I don't think he was ever gone for more than a week at a time. And usually it was just training, the crises. I think there was like 1 or 2, like you said, and they didn't last for very long. So yeah, I didn't really notice he was gone.
Well, okay.
So no, it didn't really help with my deployments.
All righty.
All right, so you were in the National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do in the National Guard?
Well, technically I've been a cook the whole time. So doesn't sound all overly exciting, it's a lot of work. But during the deployment, of course, we didn't do that due to contractors, so.
Did you supervise them?
Nope, actually, my unit, being a ground ambulance unit, for the Geneva conventions, medics are not allowed to have crew-served weapons, automatic weapons. So they gave all the automatic weapons to headquarters. Me being a cook, I'm part of headquarters. So I got a 249 machine gun, and they put me on convoys. They stuck me in the gun truck and the turret, and that's what I did during the deployment, was drive around guarding the medics on convoys. So,
Whoa.
yeah, so combat cook. They didn't give me knives, they gave me a gun. That's what my XO used to call me, us cooks, is the combat cooks. So,
Would you have preferred a knife? Like, could you be like,
well,
I will
It would have been kind
chop
of done
you?
driving along in a Humvee throwing a knife. I mean, I don't think that would have worked. So I did throw a lot of rocks.
As warning shots? Or?
Yeah, we weren't allowed to do warning shots. We were actually supposed to shoot and disable and kill on spot because it was dangerous for anything to get close to the convoy. But most of the times, we didn't really feel it was warranted. So
Okay.
I would take a rock and throw it at the vehicle that I'm trying to get them to back off, because usually it's just somebody being dumb on the road.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. We jumped right into war there.
Yeah.
So you had a few jobs after high school.
Mhm.
In high school, you had friends lived far away, you mentioned. Were you in any groups or had any activities?
I was a band geek all the way through. When I was younger, I started playing trumpet in grade school, and Really enjoyed that. My parents were both in band, so they got us into band. I was never very athletic, so that seemed to be the best way to go. And middle school, I picked up, for lack of anything better to do, a tuba. Being a scrawny kid, I mean, really scrawny kid, a tuba kind of seemed funny. So I started playing. I could barely lift the silly thing. And then I got to high school and joined marching band and played a sousaphone and had a lot of fun doing that. So that's what I did in high school.
A sousaphone?
Sousaphone. It's the marching version of a tuba. It's the big white or brass thing that's wrapped around the body and then comes out with a giant bell at the top. That's called a sousaphone.
Nice.
Named after John Philip Sousa.
I learned something today.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay, you mentioned, okay, so you graduated from high school. Did you have any interest in going to college?
Yeah, in fact, I did right after high school and failed miserably. I was not very good at high school. I was probably one of the worst students possible. I'm pretty sure my teachers were happy to get rid of me, and that's the reason why I graduated, because they didn't want to see me next year. I showed up to class every day. I just never did the homework. I passed the tests, and that's it. And that's probably the only reason I graduated high school. I went to college right afterward, at the local college there at Black Hills State University, and yeah, my new freedom was a bad thing, and I just didn't go to class, didn't do homework. I failed out. Simple as that. And being embarrassed, after a year of that, I didn't tell the folks, and I left. I went to Nebraska. So yeah, college I did right away after high school, and that didn't work out so hot. I was not mature enough for it. Thankfully, a few years later, many years later, I went back and finished.
So your many jobs, tell us about a few of them.
Well, I got my first job selling hot dogs at Sears. They were having a barbecue. My mom worked at Sears. They needed some person just to give out hot dogs for a little event they had going. So my mom got me that job, and that led to a job at Sears, selling paint. And then moved up and ended up selling water heaters, water softeners there when they used to sell them. And then that's what I actually did all the way through high school, through my first 1 year of college, and then I left there and ended up selling or working at a Hy-Vee grocery store in their kitchen department. And that actually is what led to me being a cook in the National Guard, because I didn't have to go to training for cooks, since I'd already been cooking in the civilian world. I got to skip that and went right from basic training straight to my unit, which was pretty nice. They don't do that anymore. And then I worked at that Hy-Vee for a while, and I worked at a country club, cooking in the country club, which was quite the step up because the food was a lot better. Got to have steaks and potatoes every night. It was great. Then I ended up doing something I really enjoy. I worked at Home Depot. Worked there for a while and then moved up into management there. And that's about the time I deployed. I really enjoyed the home improvement, and I learned a lot about the plumbing and electrical work and stuff like that. So that's where I learned a lot of do-it-yourself stuff. Not just from the contractors coming in, the people coming in, but just fiddling around with things, reading manuals and stuff like that. So, after that, after my deployment and whatnot, I went back home and worked some dead-end jobs for a while, Target. Worked at a security company for a while until I got my degree, and then started working for the VA. So I was a work study at the vet center for 3 years under the Volk Rehab program, and that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Volk Rehab, they helped me. They helped me to get a degree, helped me get the job that I got at the vet center there, because the office manager position opened up, and I moved into that position, and that has been a godsend. I actually got a good job, I have a degree, and then I moved here as an outreach person, which was a nice big promotion for me. So I'm really enjoying this job. That was short and to the point.
It was. You said a lot of stuff, so I'm going to elaborate on quite a few things, if that's okay.
Sure.
Let's go back to basic training.
Okay.
Tell me about basic training. What it's like for a National Guard person. We don't get to interview you guys a lot.
Yeah, National Guard. I guess there's a couple points I'll put on for basic training then. Basic training for National Guard, also known as Nasty Guard at basic training. That's what active duty calls the National Guard, is Nasty Guard, part-time Army. They kind of treat us like, that's been my experience with active duty component in general, is we treat like secondhand citizens. So yeah, I mean, that's the only part of the secondhand thing or the mistreatment we got there was just calling us nasty guard and kind of that kind of thing. But basic training was interesting. I knew what I was getting into because I was actually a little bit older than most of the people there. I was 21 when I went to basic, when most of the people there were 17, 18-year-old kids.
Did they call you grandpa?
No, there was an older guy there. He was in his 20s, a little mid to upper 20s, so he was grandpa.
Okay.
But I guess I had a different attitude than a lot of these kids, and it was still a little annoying. But basic training was really fun. I really enjoyed basic. I wasn't in shape at all. By the time I got left there, I was one of the few people that gained weight. I gained 20 pounds in basic training. And it was all muscle mass. I mean, I couldn't run a mile when I went there, and I got done. I could run 5. It was just amazing. It's a lot different now than it was back then. So I really enjoyed the obstacle courses. That was probably the best part of it. I mean, range fire was all right, but I've been shooting guns since I was old enough to hold one, so it wasn't anything new for me. I hit 39 or 40 out of 40 every time. So I didn't get to shoot a lot because I was already good at it, and they made the people that weren't any good at it shoot. So that part wasn't all that fun for me. But I really enjoyed the obstacle courses. The 3-mile running through the woods, running over, on top of, under, climbing over giant obstacles. That was a lot of fun.
What year was it?
2001, January. I went January 7th, 2001, Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Relaxin' Jackson.
Relaxin' Jackson, yes. Co-ed basic training, which was okay, I guess. The biggest problem I had, and I found the most annoying thing, is January 2002, I went to basic training. I joined in 2001. Most annoying thing I found about 2002 was what happened in September the year before, September 11th. So I go to basic training soon after, and there's a lot of press there all the time, and interviewing people that had joined because of September 11th. And I was looking back, it's like, what about those of us that were patriotic before September 11th and joined? I found that really annoying. All these people that joined up because of September 11th, which is great, but there's people that were patriotic and felt the need to do their duty before it was suddenly fashionable. So I found that somewhat annoying. But basic training I thoroughly enjoyed overall.
Okay. And then, since you already knew how to cook,
I graduated basic training, and they did what was called OJT, on-the-job training. Instead of having to go to AIT, which would have been 8 weeks, I just had to do a 4-week training, which pretty much I stayed there at Fort Jackson. They just sent me to the hospital. Of course, nobody knew what to do with me. It's not something they're used to. In fact, they sent me to the wrong AIT there on base for about 3 hours. And then my drill sergeant had to come find me and take me to the right place. And they had me cook for a day, realized I knew what I was doing, and I mopped floors for half a day every day for 4 weeks. And then I was sent home. Yeah, so I had nothing to do for 4 weeks and got paid to do it. I lived in single soldier barracks, just like a regular active duty soldier. I had to walk to the hospital because I had no transportation. And I stood out like a sore thumb because I'm a new recruit. Obviously, I'm not part of the base, not but a unit, so drill sergeants are wandering around would stop me, thinking I escaped from basic training. And they would jump me for it until I explained to them, gave them the phone number they had to call, and the NCOIC of the area that I was part of would get a call every other day about a lost soldier. And it was pretty funny because he was a former drill sergeant, so he understood, but he got tired of having to explain that this kid belongs. So.
they didn't write you a memorandum at some point
No,
that you could just carry it around.
Call this guy. No, it was annoying, but I mean, it's whatever. I mean, I was walking in South Carolina in March, April time period. It was beautiful weather and beautiful days. I mean, it was great.
That's when, so I was at Relaxin' Jackson in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I joined in March. I was like, yeah, you're not going to send me before. And I don't want to be there when it's super hot. So I decided I would be there March, April, May. And then I left in June.
Mm-hmm.
So that
was the reason why I went in January. And it was a little bit of a mistake because in January, when we went out in the mornings to do PT, there was frost on the ground. You set your canteen cup canteen down on the side. You do your PT, you go to drink, you had to break the ice off the top of your canteen to have a drink of water. It was so cold. But it was great for the runs. You get out and do the run, it was amazing. But yeah, by the time you got done, it started getting warm. It was very wet, so you were crawling around in ice cold water a lot. One of the obstacle courses had water in it underneath the barbed wire. You had to crawl underneath while it was frozen over. So you were thinking, great, I'm just going to slide across. No, you broke right through. So you're freezing, cold, muddy water. And it was interesting. It was still fun. So, that was when I didn't mind the cold. Now I hate the cold.
So you didn't really have to go through any training for your job, and then you deployed and didn't have to do your job. So how was that? Like, how did they break that to you? Were they just like, all right, you're just gonna go and do?
When they told us we were going to Iraq, the biggest question in everybody's mind was, what am I doing? Where am I living? And that's what us cooks were really lost, because the supply people, they knew what they were going to do. The medics, they all knew what they were going to do. The mechanics, no problem. They're going to be fixing the ambulances. Us cooks, we weren't so sure. They talked about us having to do the guarding of the chow halls, pretty much just clicker. You sit there for 12 hours clicking people in. Or you're sitting there watching the TCNs, the people from India cooking. You watch them. Well, they know what they're doing. You're just kind of sitting there reading the book the whole time. You're doing something like that. That was going to get a boring deployment. And some people, other cooks I know that have deployed, have done that. I was thankfully didn't have to do that. Then when we got to country, we still didn't know what we were supposed to do. And when we finally got when we got to Kuwait, we didn't know what we were supposed to do. But when we finally got to Iraq, they said, oh yeah, this is what you got to be doing. So.
You would rather do the dangerous stuff than do the clicking or the book reading?
Yes, because that would have been so dang boring. It would have been ridiculous. Granted, the convoys were boring as snot too, but they were more interesting, and I got to see some amazing places on convoys versus sitting in as a fobbit on the fob doing nothing. I would be so embarrassed to call myself a veteran after all that. I'm glad I actually did something and saw stuff.
Iraq is beautiful.
It is a very beautiful country.
I don't know if people like realize that. Like, it is. I've saw some of the most beautiful sunsets and sunrises there my whole life.
There's only two things I didn't like about that country: the insurgency, which made it dangerous, and the way that country smelled in the spring. It smelled like a wet dog in the spring when it rained. Otherwise, the place was great.
I think the devil lives under there, and that's why it's so hot.
I love the heat. Bring it on.
I was okay with it. Like, I take the heat over the cold any day of the week. However, I still think, like, that's why everybody's so mad, because the devil just kind of comes up and goes back down whenever he pleases, and it's got to be 150 degrees for him to be able to come up. That's what I think. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I like the heat. It was fun.
But you live in Ohio.
Now, I've only been here since March.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that soon. Okay. When did you deploy to Iraq?
We actually shipped out to Moab Station just after Thanksgiving. Spent 4 weeks in Moab Station, so we were actually in country before Christmas.
Of 2002?
2004.
Okay, so you had been at your unit for a while before you.
Years.
Okay. Can you tell me about what a National Guard does? Or tell me about your time at your unit. Can you,
Okay.
let us know? Explain it.
Drill weekends. For a cook, when I first got to my unit, it was fully staffed cook section. We had some great guys. They took me under the wing. We went out and hung out on Saturday night. You show up to drill in the morning and you work. You work hard. You're training. You're trying to get a month's worth of active duty training done in a couple of days. So you're working hard. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Us cooks, we're cooking lunch, pretty much is what's going on. And you're cooking it just like you would at home, but you're cooking it for 300-400 people. So we work hard during the day, and we got done for the day, and we would go and hang out in the evening. Usually, since that's the age, we go out and drink and have a good time. And then we get up the next day and we do it all over again on Sunday, except for the drinking part, because we usually hung over. So that's pretty much what we would do as a cook in the National Guard. Is you would cook, and it's hard, fast work. And it can be quite fun, especially with the people you work with. It changes though, depending on the number of people have. So like after a year of me being there, all the other cooks were done. They left, either retired or got ETS, got out. So I'm by myself having to cook for 400 people. So I'd actually show up to drill a couple hours early and on my own time and start the food and get working and that type of thing. And it worked out, and I'd get a little bit of help from some KPs and stuff like that, and they would help me out. But yeah, it's you're just trying to get as much work done in 2 days as you can. You still got to get your briefings in, your like your sexual harassment briefs, all those fun stuff that you have to do. You still have to get those in on top of feeding all these people. So you still have to get your range fires in, your masks fittings, and all this other training that everybody else does throughout the weekend. You have to cram it into getting the food in, get everything cleaned up and ready to go for the next day.
KP is kitchen patrol?
Yeah, kitchen patrol. Yeah,
Okay.
just pretty much a couple people from each platoon come and help you prep food or clean, wash dishes, wipe down the tables, whatever you need them to do. It's stuff that you don't need any cook skills to do, but you need done. And you don't have enough time as a cook to do it, so you have somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah, my grandmother was a large scale cook, and then my mother was a large scale cook. She worked at juvenile hall, and then she went over to Iraq with KBR and was a cook. And boy, did she get on my nerves. I love her, but I had a vehicle, and she would just be like, Ericka, come take me to PX. Come on, you don't need to go to PX every day. They did not change their stock, I promise.
Yeah, especially over there, they usually have the same stuff. Thankfully, they're Oreo cookies.
But they bombed her DFAC, and it was nice to be able to go and make sure she was okay and see her and be a part of, so much, then awaiting word, like knowing what both sides of that was like and I was like, you ready to go home now? Let's go home. And she was like, no. What you mean no? So suddenly I had this epiphany of like, oh, this is where you get your strength from. Like, this is where that will and desire, you just see your parents in this whole new light. So anyway, so you would have to, so people, when you guys go to drill, you stay overnight?
Sometimes. If it's just at the armory and you're local, like I was later on, you could go home at night. If you happen to live a ways away, like I did when I first started, they would have you either stay at the armory if they've got bunks, or they would, if that armory doesn't have bunks, they would get you a hotel room if necessary. So usually you're pretty comfortable, but if you're a ways away, they want you to stay there overnight. But if you went to the field, yeah, it would definitely be overnight. Sometimes you 2-3 nights in the field, you'd be sleeping out under the stars.
So would you agree that the people that you never want to piss off in the Army are the cooks, the mechanics, and supply? We
always have saying it was the cooks, supply, and the people who handle your pay are the three people you don't want to mess with. Mechanics, you can get by without your vehicle if necessary, but usually you kept them in your good graces as well. But yeah, it was the cooks, the people that pay you, and the people that handle your paperwork, because they can mess up your future. So, yeah. And a lot of people liked us cooks, especially when we would be able to find food that wasn't normal food, like steaks, out of nowhere, and prep them and cook them as a surprise for the unit as a barbecue in Iraq. They loved it. We wrote a letter to Omaha Steaks once, which is Lincoln, Nebraska, right next to Omaha Steaks. They sent us steaks, big thick porterhouses, for free. They just mailed them to Iraq. And we cooked some porterhouses out of the blue.
That's good stuff. Can you tell me where, wait, am I jumping? Okay, yeah, I'm jumping ahead. Can you tell me where you were actually stationed in Iraq?
Yes, I was stationed at FOB Spiker, Forward Operating Base Spiker, that's in Tikrit.
I was going to say C1.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's where I was stationed. I spent a lot of time on the road though, so I saw most of Iraq, but we spent a lot of time going between there to Anaconda, to Kirkuk, Balad. Didn't get into Baghdad all that much, but.
You aren't missing much.
No, I know, I wasn't.
Although Baghdad did have a Cinnabon.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, that was lovely. They had those mango.
But Taji had the best chow mas.
I never got to go to Taji.
Taji had the best jobs.
I never got to go there. I got to go to a few other places, but I never made it there.
Fanciest too. You had to swear that it was all officers that lived there or something because they had
They
sculptures, ice sculptures, they had food sculptures, and it's ridiculous.
They acted like they were the best people ever too. They were very uppity. We are getting sidetracked with our own conversation. Let's get back to the interview.
How long were you on that deployment?
13 months. So
That's-
yeah, it was quite a ways. Technically, from back then, you couldn't deploy a National Guard unit for more than 2 years in a 5-year period. So we had plenty of time. They could have kept us there. But yeah, we were back within 13 months. Took a little longer because the active duty component that was replacing us took a little longer at their mob station to get trained up before they came out. So there it goes.
So after that deployment, have you gone on any other deployments? I know in between, like, it goes back to like drill weekends and stuff, right? And then have you been on any others?
I've tried actually. I moved us back home to South Dakota, and I tried deploying. I volunteered to deploy with the 200th Engineer Company. They're out of Pierce, South Dakota. They're a bridge building engineering group, and they accepted me. I got into the unit. We were doing the mold prep stuff, and I got disqualified medically due to my lungs. I picked up the burning trash syndrome from Iraq.
Mhm.
I lost 30% of my lung capacity, and they didn't want me to get worse, so they disqualified me from the unit, and I got sent back to my unit. And then my unit itself deployed to Afghanistan, and again, I got disqualified for going again. So I've tried, but they won't take me anymore. They're just worried about me getting worse.
Super sorry to hear that.
That's the way it goes. It's not the only thing that's gone wrong with me, but it's the major one. So.
So, did you have a wife or family when you deployed?
Thankfully, no. I was one of the few people that was single. I'm also very independent, so when I lived in Nebraska without a ways from my family, I would call them once every other month, once every 3 months, special occasions maybe, but yeah, I'm very independent, so the deployment was nothing to me as far as family separation. It wasn't a big deal.
Well, how'd they feel?
About the same, actually. It wasn't a big deal. I called my mom and dad once or twice on the deployment, but usually there's a long line for the phones. One, I didn't want to be bothered. Two, there was people with families, kids, wives. It was better for them to talk to them than me having to call home. So.
Did you ever write or send emails? Or?
Not really. We didn't have much for internet back then. Internet connection. We paid to get a satellite service set up. 50 of us put money in on it. It was like $20 each a month, and the internet was terrible. So, internet wasn't a big deal back then, and emails, no, not really. I didn't really communicate all that much. All you really had was phone, and the DSN lines were slow, and it was annoying to talk to someone over because there was a 3 to 5 second lag to call somebody across the world, on the other side of the planet. So, yeah, it wasn't a big deal to call home for me.
Can you tell me what a convoy would have been like? Where you were going, what you were protecting, give me an idea if you can.
Convoy, usually they were very early in the morning. You're looking at wheels rolling 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So you're 2 hours before that to do the prep of the vehicle, check the vehicle out, make sure it's good to go. Check for leaks, make sure it's fueled, all this other stuff, get your weapons drawn, all that jazz. Making sure you have enough water, that was key. Usually you had a case of 1 liter bottles, it's about a dozen bottles of water per person in each vehicle, so you had stacks of water. Emery's, which nobody ate. But yeah, and then you'd roll out. Our primary mission was to augment the security forces that were in convoys protecting the convoy. And our medics were integrated in convoys throughout the country. So we would just do side missions. And sometimes our unit would have dedicated missions to like one of them was a school mission. We went out to drop off school supplies and books and stuff like that to a very impoverished school. And we pulled guard duty around that. So yeah, we would just be the show of force when necessary on convoys, and they would last anywhere from 6 hours to 20 hours, depends on if you ran into problems on the convoy. If you ran into an IED on the convoy, if it was unexploded, that was a long day, because you'd have to guard that IED now. You couldn't move off that IED. You had to wait for EOD to come out to take care of it, and they were pretty busy, so it could be in an hour, it could be tomorrow before they show up, and you can't leave that IED. So convoys could last days, even if you're just going across the street.
I'm gonna find the best way to ask this question.
Okay.
We hear a lot of tales of National Guard unit and reservist units come in and they often lose a lot of people because they aren't prepared. And it sounds like your unit was very well trained and very well prepared. Would you agree with that statement?
Depends on the unit, but I think it's the same thing with active duty. It depends on the unit. How good is your command? How good is your training scenarios? So like that. My unit was very well trained. 313 Med Company was obviously a medic unit, and the thing about the National Guard, a lot of people, especially active duty, don't understand is the National Guard, yeah, we train 1 week in a month, we're Army 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, but you take those people in that unit and see what they do in the civilian world, and they're doing the same thing in the civilian world. So our medics were nurses and doctors in the real world. So the training wasn't just 1 week in a month, it was every day. And so we get to Iraq and our unit is suddenly, we're full-time nurses, full-time doctors in Iraq. Our XO was a flight nurse for a local hospital. Most of our people in the unit were nurses or going to college for nursing. So we were probably one of the highest prepared units. That's why we only took a couple of weeks at Mob Station to get through Mob stuff. It was pretty much just wash your hands and move on, because we knew what we were doing. There are units out there that, yeah, they're a big cluster, but ours isn't that way. And you look at the unit I was in South Dakota, it was an MP unit. What is half that unit? They're either prison guards or they're local sheriffs, they're highway patrolmen. They do that every day. They have more experience than the active duty components even. So it really depends on the unit for how prepared they are. So really, I think it's really huge on the command. You can see a bad officers not push the training or hold the unit together, and you lose all the good people. So, yeah.
So, like I said, yours was together.
So ours was very together, yes. I've been very fortunate in the units that I've been in that they've been pretty high speed.
How often do you move units?
I've only been in 3 units my whole time.
That sounds like a lot. Is it because you moved?
It's because I've moved. Well, 2 out of 3 is because I moved there. I joined the 313th Medical Unit in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's my first unit. I moved to South Dakota, so I had an interstate transfer. That's where I joined the 109th group. That unit was disbanded, and I got moved to the 235th MPs. So that's where I'm at now in South Dakota still. I'm waiting to transfer to Ohio now. But yeah, so the only time I've ever moved units, and it's not uncommon to move units in the National Guard, but usually people stick with the same unit for most of their career. Mainly because you have one MP unit in the state of South Dakota or one medical unit in Nebraska. So you're a medic, where else are you gonna go? So yeah, you get pretty stuck. That makes movement up in the ranks difficult.
So you're fortunate.
Yeah, I've getting up to see a lot of different units. It's definitely you get to see the differences, how training's done, stuff like that. It's pretty neat.
Okay. So when did you become not single?
Well, married in 2013. Started dating my wife almost 2 years before that. Yeah, just after Thanksgiving, 2 years before that. So.
Where'd you meet her?
She's gonna hate that I said this. Ever heard of the game World of Warcraft?
Yes.
I met my wife on that game. I was a raid leader. Yes, very nerdy, I know. I was a raid leader of a large group of people that go into and to defeat monsters and giant beings and stuff like that. And she was one of the people in my group. She had had a bad day and just left the group randomly, and that was uncommon for her, so I checked up on her the next day, and that's when we started talking. 2 months later, she decided she's gonna come visit. She didn't tell her mom or nothing. She just flew up here to meet a guy that she never met from Texas. She told her best friend to cover for her, and that was it. So, yeah, that's how we met and started a relationship. 2 years later, we're married.
Where did you live then?
I lived in South Dakota, and she lived in Texas.
Okay.
And she was the good girl, never did anything wrong type, mama's girl type thing. And yeah, surprised the heck out of her mom all of a sudden. So I made her call her mom so she got to South Dakota.
Okay, so I don't think we asked this. Why did you choose to join the National Guard rather than Army or Air Force or?
My roommate was in the National Guard, and I'd never heard of the National Guard, honestly. I never really noticed it even existed until I got this roommate, and he seemed to be having a good time, so it seemed like a good way to go. I needed direction in my life at the time, so I decided to join, and it was the best decision I ever made. I had thought about going to active duty in high school and never followed through, and the National Guard just kind of fell into my lap.
Why the Army though, not the Air Force?
I didn't know there was an Air Force Guard.
Oh.
No idea. I didn't know the National Guard existed. The Army was there. There's a recruiter. Boom, I'm in. That's all there was to it. I had no idea there was a Air National Guard. I didn't know there was an Army Reserve. All I knew is there was active duty, and I didn't feel like doing active duty.
Did your genealogy history tell you that you had people in other branches, or was everybody else Air Force also?
After I joined, my dad was the only one that's been Air Force. After I joined, I found out my grandfather was actually National Guard Army. My great-grandfather was active duty during World War II. He retired as a colonel after the war. Yeah, he was a big thing in the Signal Battalion. And it's been Army as far as I know, as far back as I can remember. So my uncle actually was in the Army during the Gulf War. He was an MP with one of those dogs. So yeah, my dad was the oddball in the Air Force. I give him a hard time about that because the rivalry and everything. It's pretty funny.
Okay, so your dad took the easy way out.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
My daughter, so I was Army and her father was Army, and I keep telling her to join the Air National Guard, and she's just like, why, Mom? You think I can't work? Why? You just want me to push buttons? Why, Mom? Why? And I'm just like, I want you to have the best life possible.
Life will be easier joining the Air Force. So it's true. I mean, something like that. You get the best chow halls, you get the best bases.
They pay you extra to live where the Army lives. Come on.
Yeah, no kidding. You don't have to deploy as bad. If you deploy, you go to Kuwait. Woo!
And you're only gone for 3 months.
Yeah. Well,
don't stress your mother out. Just join. No, it's all fun and games and riffing, but at the end of the day, we all stand on the same team, and that is to protect.
Our boots are the same color.
Yeah. No, they're not. Are they?
For the most part, they're all brown now.
Oh, okay. Sure. Does the Air Force wear boots? Do they actually get issued boots?
They get sneakers, those padded things.
I know,
No,
right?
not
Isn't
really.
that lovely?
They do wear boots.
Okay, here we go again. off track.
Yeah, don't get us into the Marines.
Wait, well.
Oh, we got a Marine here. Nice. I'll tell you a story in a bit about a Marine.
Go ahead and tell it now if you want.
All right. Closest I came to dying in Iraq was due to a Marine. We're on MSR Tampa driving north of to Crit. And MSR Tampa is like a divided interstate, 4-lane, 2 on each side going different directions, a large median. And our convoy, of course, driving down the center of the road. That's what we do. Avoid everything on the sides. And and the cars behind us, to get around us, they'll actually hop the median, go onto oncoming traffic, blow by the convoy, and then hop back over because they're not allowed within a certain range of our convoy. And they want to go by us because we're only doing 55 miles an hour. Well, this car does that, hops the median and starts going on the oncoming traffic, and there's another convoy coming the other direction. I'm the rear gunner in this convoy watching this car, and the other convoy is a bunch of Marines. And the Marine in the front has a 50 cal machine gun. And this car sees them and panics and goes into the median and starts going in between the two convoys, which is a big no-no because now you're really close to both convoys. That Marine, not paying attention what's beyond that car, opens up with his 50 cal shooting at his car. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with a 50 caliber round, but it has a tendency to punch holes in things like cars because they're made to really stop something bigger than a car. Well, those bullets are going straight through the car and at my convoy, including my vehicle. And my lieutenant, who happened to be in my vehicle, called that Marine convoy. Next thing you know, that Marine drops. Somebody swept his feet out from underneath him because he was shooting at friendly forces. So the closest I came to dying was because of a stupid Marine. So that's my Marine story. I mean, I love Marines. The Marines saved our butts a lot of times. I mean, some of their helicopters and planes would patrol our convoys constantly. It was great. I mean, but there's some Marines that, yeah, you just shake your head. It's like, yeah, that's why they call them jarheads.
I like this one.
Like I said, there's some Marines out there that should have been Army, but.
Okay, I agree.
Okay, so you're still in the National Guard.
I am.
Right.
I got 2 more years to go.
And you've stayed in kind of the same unit for most of the time.
That's correct, yep.
Have you made like a lot of like friends? Are there like certain friends that, you have like a really
Close relationships?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, I still have a lot of friends in my original unit, 313th out of Nebraska. In fact, this Christmas, I'm gonna get to go see them for the first time in 15 years. But yeah, I still maintain a lot of contacts for old units. You find that at a deployment, you get a lot closer with a lot of these people because they're something they're your family. One thing with the National Guard is you only see the people 1 week in a month, so they're just acquaintances for the most part until you go to annual training. Annual training, you get a lot closer with your close-knit of people because you live with them. You get a lot closer with them. Deployment, you get a lot more of those people because you get the entire unit you see every day, all day. So you get a lot of close friends, and I've got a lot of close friends in my old unit, 313th, and then some of the people in South Dakota I still keep in contact with too. We weren't as close because it was really just annual training type. We got to know each other, but if I deployed with them, you'd notice a difference. Because when I didn't get to deploy with my unit that went over, I had to stay back. They came back, and you can tell they were a lot closer, and I was more of an outcast now because I didn't deploy with them. So it's a big difference. But yeah, the people I've deployed with, I keep in pretty close contact with. It's the only reason I have Facebook.
Okay, so now, I guess tell us about what you're doing now, or
Tell us about Voc Rehab. You mentioned that that's how you went to college and then Voc Rehab. So for civilians and other people who aren't sure about what that particular program is, can you go into more detail about it?
Sure. I didn't know anything about a lot of my benefits when I first started looking. I decided I needed to go back to college. I didn't know how to use my GI Bill. I really didn't know anything. So I started looking around for veteran benefits, and I found this place called Voc Rehab that would help you get a job. And at the time, I'd been unemployed. I got laid off a while back. And so I started looking and said, this is going to help me get a job. So I went down to the Voc Rehab, my local Voc Rehab office, and said, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to go back to school. I'm kind of floundering here. I don't know what I'm going to do. And they had me do some tests and accepted me to the program. And I found out that this is a program, not only does it help you get a job, but if the job requires education, they're going to help you get that education. And it was really great for me because being unemployed, now they're going to pay me a stipend. They paid me a stipend to go to school. They paid for all the school. They bought me all the supplies I possibly could use, including a new laptop for the school. They supported me through everything I needed. If I needed a tutor, they got me a tutor. If I had medical issues, which us veterans do, and I was dealing with several of them, they got me the doctor's appointments that I needed. It was amazing. I mean, after a while I said I needed a little more income. They found me a work study position, which obviously from earlier got me a full-time job, which got me to here. I mean, Voc Rehab not only got me a degree, but it got me where I'm at today. It got me a job, and that's the biggest thing. I'm a huge advocate of Voc Rehab because they help veterans get work again, feel purpose again. And they support you 100% with everything. I failed a couple college courses, thought I was gonna get dropped out of the program, and it wasn't a real big deal. They helped me redo those courses, got me tutors for those courses. It was a very relaxed environment. My counselor was an amazing person. JP was awesome. I was very sad to see she retired. But yeah, I wholeheartedly am behind the voc rehab program. So.
And when was that? When did you do that?
Oh, shoot. Let's see here. I got to do some math. 7 years ago. So 2013? 2012 was the year before I got married. Yeah. 2012 was when I first started the voc rehab program. And yeah, it took me several years to finish a degree, but they were behind me every day.
And so was your wife.
Yes, after I got going, I ended up making my life more complicated by getting married. But when I first started school, I was single. So, and then my wife comes in and she thankfully was smart. She has a degree in chemistry, and so she helped me with math, which after not being in school for 13 years, trying to take a college algebra course, how about blow your mind? Oh my God. The school I went to was a night class place, and it was 3 hours long courses, 1 day a week. So you go to class for 3 hours and you're done for the week. Well, college algebra for 3 hours will melt your brain. And I'd go to class, prepared for class, had my mind blown over that 3 hours. I'd go home, do the homework, and then do the homework again a couple days later, and then a couple days later I'd do it a third time. Come back to class, I know the material, good to go, get my mind blown again. They'd repeat that many times. We get to the test, my first test in college algebra, I got a 70%. Barely passed it. And I was ecstatic. I was so happy I passed that test. And then the next test I got a 72%. And every test after that was at least 1 or 2% better until the last one. And then I got the same points. And I gave up at the end though, because the last class this semester was on imaginary numbers. And when they put letters in the thing, it was bad enough putting letters into math. But when they started making numbers that don't actually exist, I just threw the book out the window and said, I'm not learning that crap. And didn't bother learning it and didn't answer those questions. But I passed college algebra with a C.
Have you ever used imaginary numbers in your real life?
They don't exist. Why bother? They don't exist. I don't see any point of teaching somebody that's not getting into math or some engineering degree stupid numbers that don't actually imagine or exist. They had to create a letter special for them, the letter I. I had enough problems with X. Leave me alone.
Look, X. We don't know why. We don't know why X left. Stop asking us.
Stop asking me to find your ex. She's not coming back.
Yeah. That's that one.
Yeah. I wish I'd known that joke back then.
I wrote it as a test answer for sure.
Though they did have a funny sign up at the school one day when I walked in. They had a big sign that says, vision impaired seminar this way. Had an arrow. Okay. But they didn't have it in Braille.
So the voc rehab, that's like vocational rehab.
Mm-hmm.
They helped you finish college and they ultimately got you this job.
Roundabout, yep.
So tell us about what you do here.
Well, here I am the outreach specialist. Pretty much what it is I do is I go around talking to veterans, making sure they get what they're looking for, whatever they need. If they're looking for any type of benefits, I can be a resource for that. I'll find them the contact for it. But my main job is to make sure they're getting the mental health care that they need. Here at the Vet Center, we're a mental health and readjustment counseling center. So we help pretty much with anything mental health, being sexual trauma, being just PTSD, whatever it is. We have several full-time counselors that help with that. It's my job to make sure people know we exist because we are part of the VA, but people a lot of times don't realize we're around. So I go out to events like just this last weekend I was at the Fall Farm Fest up in Troy. And I talked to general public and several veterans. In fact, I found a couple of people, one of them actually specifically would like us to call him to get help because he didn't know we existed, didn't know the benefit was there. So One of our counselors will call him today and get him scheduled. So that's primarily what I do here, and I have a large truck that I get to drive around. That's a big advertising on wheels is pretty much what it is. It's a multi-use vehicle, but yeah, I love to go out and talk to vets because, like I said, when I got out or when I was going to school, I had no idea what I was eligible for, what was out there. I didn't even know how to sign up for disability. After I had gotten into the bulk radio program, I started learning a bunch of stuff, and that's when I signed up for my own VA disability and stuff like that. There's a lot of people out there that are still in that position. Vietnam vets, World War II vets, they don't know what they're eligible for. I want to get out there and let them know, hey, you can get this, this, and this, and it's not, you're not living off the system. You've earned these benefits. You're disabled. There's a reason these things are out there to help you. So trying to break that stigma of I don't want to take away benefits from another veteran. Well, that's not true. The benefits are already there. You just need to take advantage of them.
Yay! That's
Sorry, get off my soapbox now.
fantastic service, and we're so happy you guys are here to offer it.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I very much believe in the Vet Center program. So.
And you get paid well.
And I do get paid decently, yes.
Yay!
Yeah, it's a nice little bump out here.
So, I guess as we kind of start to wrap this up, what are some life lessons you learned from the military? Your continuing service.
Life lessons, that's a deep question. I'm trying to think of a deep answer, it's just not coming. Life lessons, well, I could say that the military has definitely gave me a purpose and direction. If it wasn't for the National Guard, joining the military in general, I probably would still be working a dead-end job myself. So I would recommend at least a couple of years service for anybody because it's going to give you a little direction in life, even if it's not the direction you thought. I don't know, I don't have a real deep answer for that. So as far as the life lessons go, expect the unexpected, I guess. That's one of the biggest things I figured out. Oh, and hurry up and wait. That's a really good one. I learned really quick was learn to be patient. And whatnot.
Don't volunteer for anything?
Actually, I didn't believe in that.
No?
No, because if you volunteer for enough things, they tell you to quit volunteering, and then you don't have to volunteer anymore, and you don't get voluntold.
Okay.
So, and usually, if you volunteer, you get the better of the volunteer side of things. So, if you volunteer enough, they start giving you better jobs. Versus if you don't volunteer and they tell you to go do something.
That's only in the National Guard.
Nah, that happened to me in active duty too. Honestly, that happened to me overseas, active duty battalion. I volunteered a couple of things and I volunteered again and they told me to quit volunteering.
Okay.
So.
I'll try that next time I'm deployed.
Well, there you go.
Is there anything you feel we haven't discussed that you want in this interview? Maybe like some experiences that stand out?
When she asked me for the interview thing, there's a couple of stories I usually tell people about deployments because people don't ever hear about the bad stuff in the deployments. I had mentioned a while back the school mission when we were in Iraq. We went to this mud hut school in the middle of nowhere, very small community, and had the typical way you'd think: children, and then the lady there being the teacher, and then the principal, the guy. And we brought water and food and crayons, stuff that was donated from over back here in the States that were sent out to give for this type of thing, shoes, clothing, the basics. And that was all great and all, and very rewarding. But the thing that stood out to me the most was this, had been like 3-year-old girl. She wasn't wearing hardly anything, a very thin slip of a dress, no shoes, walking across this pebbly rock ground. Heat of the day, and she bypassed the toys, she bypassed the school supplies, the clothing, everything, to go to a case of water, the 12-pack of 1-liter bottles of water. You know those things are heavy. She grabs that and starts dragging it, just bringing it home. She had her priorities straight. You look at a 3-year-old kid here, he'd be going after the toys. This kid went after the water. We stopped her, put her in a vehicle, we sent a medic and a gun truck out to her house and did a medic check on the family. Dropped off food, clothing, water. She had shoes by the end of the day. She had new clothes. Her brothers had clothes. Mom and dad had new clothes. Go back to the scene of the school and there was adults fighting over the toys. getting into fistfights over the toys because they wanted to get them to sell to get money for the family. That's what they would do with it. But the adults were fighting over toys and the kids were grabbing water. It just blew my mind, made you want to cry. And then hopefully he sees this. Eric Ring, he was kind of one of my closest friends in Iraq, and he was my driver this day. And we were driving along on some back road, and we come to a Iraqi National Guard checkpoint. And we don't stop for nothing on convoys whatsoever. And so the road is completely blocked because it's a checkpoint. But they had the median you could go through. And this is the spring, so I had some water in this median. The problem with the water, though, is, of course, there's no bathroom facilities for the Iraqi National Guardsmen or anybody there, so they just go wherever, including this water. So it made it really yucky for the story. But Eric says, okay, hold on, we're gunning it. And so we're the front vehicle, we take it and we head for that water. And it was a little deeper than he expected by a couple of feet. So we hit this water full bore in a Humvee, and you know those things aren't very aerodynamic or water dynamic, and I'm the gunner in this thing. Wall of water, higher than me, comes over and just sloshes, soaks me completely, gets the lieutenant wet in the passenger seat. Eric's dry as a bone. Doesn't get a drop on him. Of course, these, you know, Humvees are not exactly watertight either. The water's pouring in. He's still dry as a bone. That was funny as heck. Now I smell like poo. And this is like the first hour of the convoy. The whole convoy smelled like poo. So yeah, so just a funny anecdotal story for you. But yeah.
So you said that there was bad stuff that happened. Nobody wants to hear that. I want to hear it. If you have to share it, I'd like to hear it, because it's not all, and that's what this platform is for.
The easier one, the first convoy I was on, we were spreading our medics out. We hadn't been there a month, and we go up from Tikrit to Balad, which is about 3 hours away, not very far. Real first convoy, you're nervous as heck. We only had 2 gun trucks, but you needed a total of 4 minimum. So we requested and got 2 other vehicles. So our 2 vehicles were Humvee gun trucks, and the 2 requested vehicles were LMTVs, so larger, like 5-ton trucks. They had 50 cals, and we only had 249, so we met the minimum requirement for convoy, 4 gun trucks, and we had about 20 ambulances in the convoy. We get to Balad, no big deal. Drop off the medics, spend an hour, take a break. We leave Balad to the south gate, which is kind of neat because the gate was actually a tank. They would drive out of the way, drive out, and drive the tank back. Nice gate. We weren't more than 5 minutes outside of Balad, driving along this 1.5 lane road. And as you're driving along these roads, instead of like on MSR Tampa where people could cross over to get on incoming traffic to go around you, they don't have enough room. So the rule was they pull over and stop, and you'd go by them. And it wasn't uncommon for them to get out of their vehicles to talk to each other. So it wasn't any big deal to see people staying outside the vehicle. I was the first or second, I think it was the first or second vehicle, I don't remember off the top of my head, that in that convoy. And I noticed one of the Haji trucks, which is like the size of a European Toyota pickup, but it's a cab over truck, so it's all bed and small cab. Jumped the entire line of trucks, which again wasn't all that uncommon, but what was weird about him was he got out of his vehicle, walked around to behind his vehicle, so I got a little suspicious about that. So I turn and start watching him, and he gets back in his vehicle and then does a 90-degree turn onto this little dirt road out into the field. And that was very suspicious. So I turn and start watching him. And I was the second vehicle, I remember. The first vehicle passes that point. I get past that point. The LMTV gets near that point, and just about in between us, a roadside bomb goes off. Thankfully, I wasn't hurt. I rung my bell. All I can remember is I dropped, yelled what we're supposed to yell, IED, IED, IED. Got my head back in the game, jumped back up, grabbed my 249 and started looking for that truck because I knew he was it, but he's now out of range for my 249. The LMTV behind me was disabled, took some shrapnel into the radiator in the front, and it was down Nobody got hurt on that convoy. We call up to Balad and say, hey, we just got hit just outside the base, send support. And next thing I know, 2 Apaches burn by us. And I just point at that truck and it gets blown up. So, and then we decide to continue the convoy with our 4 gun trucks. So we hook up the LMTV to the big truck, to tow it with the tow bar, and my vehicle becomes the rear Humvee. We go out to MSR Tampa, we go to turn right onto MSR Tampa, and the tow bar jackknifes and gets up on the wheel of the rear vehicle. So now they're disabled again on the busiest road in Iraq. And so now we're already pucker factored real bad. And so I'm guarding the dirt road, or the road we just came off of, and all of this road, which is MSR Tampa, and it's just getting clogged. And we're of course not going anywhere, so we're causing a major traffic jam. So I'm sitting there trying to guard this, and I notice off to my left side, something crawling around in the grass. It's tall grass, and all I see is this white things crawling around. Of course, I'm already somewhat freaked out, and I'm thinking turbans crawling around in the grass. So I turn my gun towards that, and thankfully, this is the funny part of the whole story, it turns out to be a bunch of chickens crawling around in the grass. But not sooner do I notice there were chickens that turned off of the dirt road onto the 2-lane road we just got off of was a tractor full of people in the back of the trailer that the tractor was pulling, and those people in that trailer all had AK-47s.
Oh.
They were all sitting there, rifle butts on the ground. So they were non-combatants, but they scared the living crap out of us. They ended up turning and going the other way on MSR Tampa, thankfully. But I have no idea who they were, but it scared us pretty good. We finally get that jackknife fixed. We get going back down MSR Tampa. Not more than 5 minutes later, one of the wheels on the disabled LMTV lights on fire. Turns out it had been hit and deflated, and nobody knew. And it was rolling around as a deflated tire, rubbing, and it lit on fire. So we ended up having to pull over again on this major highway, put that out, and do the fastest tire change known to man. Thankfully, that was the last thing. That 3-hour convoy took 8 hours to go back. So that was my first convoy. It was interesting. I wasn't there for this other bad thing, but one of our National Guardsmen, of course, National Guard, a lot of people stay in the National Guard for a long period of time. Some of these guys are getting to be pretty old, they're pushing 60s. This gentleman that deployed with us ended up with heart issues while we were over there, so we sent him back. And to replace him, Staff Sergeant Tricia Jameson. Sorry. Came over to replace him. She wasn't in country for more than a month when she went out on a convoy with special spores. And, thank you. They were integrated into a Marine convoy. The Marine convoy's front gun truck got hit with 4 Marines in it by a large IED, destroying the Humvee. The medics went to respond to that, drive their ambulance up to it. There was a secondary IED. Secondary IED goes off, killing Tricia and badly wounding spores. The Humvee lit on fire, from what I understand. The Marines got out from other gun trucks, and they couldn't get the doors open on the ambulance. And there's oxygen, of course, in the back of the ambulance, so they're worried about an explosion and a bigger fire. So the Marines lifted the roof of the ambulance. If you've ever seen a military ambulance, it's all one piece, so it's pretty tough. Lifted the roof so they can open up the armored doors to pull them out. They got them both out, and spores lived. But she took a piece of shrapnel missed her arm or went inside her chest, bounced around on the inside. I guess nothing major got hit, but she ended up going back home. But yeah, we lost Staff Sergeant Jameson.
We are so sorry.
I didn't even know her. They took us off convoys for a couple of weeks after that because we were pretty pissed. So we found out something worse later at her funeral. Westboro Baptist Church was there protesting it. We were pissed. So, the rest of that year was a little bit harder. Biggest problem I had was my battle buddy. She was best friends with Spores. So, thankfully Spores is all right today and the family, and she's doing pretty good. But yeah, that's my rough story.
We very much so appreciate you sharing your truth with us.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Okay, we have some more rough questions for you, but they'll be easier than that.
All right.
Okay. How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, war in general, there's reasons for it. Sometimes there's good reasons, sometimes there's not so good reasons. Certain wars, I think, absolutely justified. I mean, you look at World War II, there's a reason we were there. Vietnam, I think we should never have been there, in my opinion. So there's certain wars, yeah, absolutely, they're necessary. There's certain wars, not so much. Should we have been in Iraq? In my opinion, no. We shouldn't have. I think we're there for false reasons. I think somebody trumped something up, in my opinion. But no, I don't think we should have been there for the reasons we were there. We were there, honestly. The only reason we're interested in the Middle East is oil. Simple as that. They have what we need. We don't go to Africa for the same reasons. So it's not there. We're not there to save the people. And granted, that's a great cause. We were there doing a lot of good. We did a lot of good. There's also a lot of bad. We're just there for the wrong reasons. If the war is for the right reason, absolutely. Send me. But yeah, it really depends on the reasons why we're there.
So I would assume Iraq and Afghanistan you feel the same, or is that something separate?
Iraq is, like I said, I'm not 100% sure it was 100% justified. Afghanistan, I think, is a different ball of wax.
Okay.
Because we're there for the terrorists. We're there because that's where they were. And they hit us. I feel differently about Afghanistan.
Okay.
Now, should we still be there? I have no idea. I don't have the facts. It's been 18, 19 years, 17 years maybe since we started that. So I'm not sure how we're going to justify it being a win or a loss, or why we justify we're still there. I'm sure there's a good reason. I just don't know.
Okay. All right, last question. If we've covered everything you want to talk about.
Yeah.
All right.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will watch this or might watch this interview?
Join for a reason. If you're going to join the military, join for a reason. Know what you're getting into. I recommend everybody join. I really do, because I think the discipline itself teaches the youth a good lesson. But know what you're getting into. Understand that the wars today are different than they were 50 years ago. You're going to be deployed. Right now with Afghanistan going on, it's going to happen. Know that if you join active duty, it's going to be different than the National Guard. Know the National Guard, you're going to have the same job as active duty. So don't think if you're deployed, you're going to have something easy. So it can be convoys, it can be whatever. So, but I absolutely encourage anybody and everybody to join. I think, honestly, I think it should be a requirement. After you finish high school, you do 2 years service, just to learn a trade, if nothing else. benefits. Use the benefits. Go to school, get that education. Doesn't have to be college. Go to a trade school. I don't care. Use those benefits though. You earn them. And if you are hurt, use those benefits too, because you've earned them.
All right. That concludes our interview with Michael Green. Thank you for your time to do this interview, and thank you for your military service.
Thank you.
Thank you.